turmoil with the publication of the EU Withdrawal Document, as it is somewhat ironically entitled. So let's take a look at the top 5 reasons to absolutely oppose the withdrawal agreement currently being touted by Theresa May, her spineless cabinet and the legacy media as her best way out of the EU. Reason number 1. The withdrawal agreement makes it explicitly clear that whilst we nominally leave the EU on March 29, 2019, the very next day we instantly fall into a legal transitional framework which keeps us tightly aligned to the EU until December 2020. During that period, we obey all EU laws, all EU regulations, all EU directives. How is that taking back any control whatsoever? Furthermore, the December 2020 date is not an agreed date to then finally leave the EU. Oh no. In fact, the only theoretical exit date the document contains is 2099. It's hidden there in plain sight. The text is clear. Unless the EU itself agrees to the UK leaving the Union, it must stay in this legally binding transition arrangement for a period with a stated limit of the end of the century. For the Prime Minister to state we are leaving when her document states we are staying to potentially the end of the century is truly amazing. If the EU decides the UK will stay fixed in aspect, legally tied to Brussels for generations to come, then that is legally precisely what will happen. Reason number 2. A central reason for voting to leave the EU was that the UK would take back full control of our laws and make our courts supreme again. The Prime Minister insists the agreement faithfully delivers on this. But then we read in Article 158 that the jurisdiction of the ECJ will last until 8 years after the end of the transition period. Her claim that we have thrown off the burden of the ECJ is without foundation. Article 6.2 spells out unambiguously that the UK will still be bound by any or all future changes to EU law, in which it will have no say, not to mention having to comply with current EU law. At the moment, the UK has at least some input into EU law, but in this new arrangement that she's telling us is the best, we will be bound by them but absolutely powerless to influence them. This is a staggering and complete loss of UK sovereignty. Nothing has been brought back. Everything has been surrendered. Reason number 3. The UK voted to leave the EU customs union, arguably the most toxic aspect of the EU. This protectionist cartel artificially inflates prices, restricts competition, and in every way adds cost to the consumer. Articles 40 to 49 essentially mandate the UK's ongoing membership of the customs union in all but name. In fact, by placing the entire UK within the customs union in the time unlimited backstop, the Prime Minister ensures that we are caught in this customs union in perpetuity. Now, one consequence of this is that the UK cannot then conclude any trade deals with any countries outside the EU. This invalidates the UK concluding the fair trade deal on offer from the United States, for example, at the moment. Our membership of the customs union dissolves a central pillar of why we would want to Brexit. Reason number 4. In Article 101 of her agreement, the UK agrees not to prosecute EU employees who are or who might be deemed in the future criminals, And if that wasn't bad enough, we see in Article 104 that the UK must promise never to tax former EU officials based here, the likes of the Mandelsons, the Kinnocks, all the fat cats, on their EU pensions, or tax any current Brussels bureaucrats on their salaries. The EU and its employees are to be immune from UK tax laws. So in essence, the UK is agreeing here to keep the troffers in the style to which they have become accustomed. And even if these troffers get convicted by some miracle of crimes, we agree that the UK will not prosecute them and will continue to grant them the required tax immunity. So UK citizens are forced to pay a tax, but EU fat cats to remain immune from tax. Reason number 5. Article 124 states that the UK will be tied to EU foreign policy, bound by the obligations stemming from the international agreements concluded by the Union, but of course unable to influence such decisions. So the UK accepts that it will support the foreign policy of the EU and as such effectively ceases to operate as a sovereign nation with regard to its relationships with nations outside the EU. Furthermore, given that the EU has declared an intent to have an army, which Macron has stated may need at some point to go to war with Russia, China, even America, isn't it insane that we would agree to be bound by such a policy? And yet, that's exactly what's in the agreement. The text of the withdrawal agreement, when laid bare and fully scrutinised, betrays every promise this Prime Minister has made. It confounds the idea that we are leaving the EU in any meaningful sense. It ensures we are bound by the laws of the European Court of Justice. It keeps our borders porous. It stops us cutting free trade deals. It forces us to pay further billions into an organisation we are supposed to have left. It is, in short, a betrayal of Brexit. The best summary of it that I have read is that it is akin to the crushing terms imposed on a nation defeated in war. And that's the best that Theresa May can deliver, she tells us, with a straight face. She needs to go in the name of God, and go now.